In this video, we are going to put together our pending contact request screen in our contacts activity. So if you recall, our contacts activity shows two different screens depending on what's listed on the spinner. And for this screen, it's going to show us the contact requests that we have sent but haven't been accepted or rejected by the recipient. So, I guess let's go ahead and get started. Won't be too crazy difficult. We're just going to put together a layout file and adapter and hook it all up into that fragment that we created in the last couple videos. So, I will also be taking this as an opportunity to talk about Picasso. Now, we are going to be displaying the avatars of the particular users that are being displayed. And to display images, what I'm going to be doing is using this third-party library from Square, which are the same people who made Auto, by the way. And we're going to use this to load the images. So this will take care of all the things such as caching and downloading on a different thread and all that fun stuff. Now, generally speaking, when you load an image in Android off either off your device or off the internet, you want that call to be asynchronous because you don't want a I/O operation taking place on the main thread, because that would pause the main thread and the screen would look a little laggy. So we're going to use Picasso to manage all of that stuff with us, for us, and it makes it really, really easy. You can see right here in basically pretty much all you need to know about Picasso is that one line of code, and it'll handle everything else for you basically looks like magic. It's really straightforward. You don't have to create any sync tasks or loaders or anything. So we're going to use this. We're going to plop this into our project, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to scroll all the way to the bottom, and I'm going to grab this line right here. And this line is going to be what's going to be used by Gradle to include this file into our project. You don't have to worry about, in the past, before Gradle, you'd have to download the jar yourself and import it into your library folder, but with Gradle, everything is super straightforward. So I'm going to come down here, just copy this line, and then I'm going to jump back into Android Studio. And for the Gradle file, go ahead and close it out, I guess, so I can point out which Gradle file we're opening. We're opening the one that says module app. These two build.gradle files, you can think of this one, the project Gradle file, as the solution if you're familiar with Visual Studio, and you can think of the app Gradle file as the individual project. Now what we're going to do is we're going to locate our dependencies block, and we're going to come down here, and I'm just going to paste in that line of code, which will pull down Picasso from the internet. It'll pull down this specific version. Now, if you guys have a newer version, don't worry about that. You can go ahead and use a newer version as long as the API doesn't change. But I guess if the API does change, then just use the version that I'm using right there. Okay, so now I'm going to scroll all the way up, or go all the way to the top right and select Sync Now. And you do that because when you edit your Gradle file, Android Studio really likes to go in and check things to make sure that it's all up to date, and also it'll like to go out and actually download that jar that we just linked to it. So now at this point, this library is now added to our project, so that's pretty cool. Okay, so on our package, what I'm going to go ahead and do is, inside of my views namespace, I'm going to create a new class. We're going to go ahead and we're going to start off with creating the adapter, because the adapter is going to be pretty straightforward. It won't be that much different than any of the adapters that we've seen up until this point, although we do have the addition of loading in an image. Now, the adapter's name is going to be contact requests adapter, and I'll hit enter, and I'll remove that annoying comment. And I'm going to have him inherit from array adapter of contact request. So array adapter of contact request will basically, like you saw before, but when we were talking about list views, it'll give us a lot of functionality right out of the gate, so we don't have to re-implement a bunch of code. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create my constructor. So I'm going to say public contact request adapter, and for his constructor parameter, he's going to take in a base activity. Then the only real line of code that we need right here inside the constructor is invoking the super constructor. And the overload that I want to use is the one that's all the way at the top, and we'll pass in the activity as the context, and for the resource we're going to pass in 0. Now we're passing in 0 for the resource because we want to basically handle our layout inflation all by ourselves and not use any of the functionality of the array adapter to handle the view creation. So I'm passing in 0 because we're not going to be using any of that layout stuff, and 0 is not a valid layout file, so if it ever tried to get inflated, there would be an error telling us that the array adapter has tried to do something that we didn't want it to do, basically. Now, the first thing I want to do is I want to create my view holder. So I'm going to say private class view holder, and he's going to have a public text view display name, a public text view created at, and a public image view avatar. So you can probably see where this is going as far as how the layout's going to look. Now that I have my view holder written, one thing that I do sometimes, I sometimes create a constructor on the view holder, and that accepts a view. And then I do all of my grabbing the references to my objects inside the constructor. So now I say something like display name equals cast to text view view.find view by ID, passing in the ID of this view. Now, the ID that I'm going to be using for this particular view will be interesting because we haven't created it yet, but just bear with me, we will be creating this here very shortly. It's going to be r.id, and then the layout file I'm going to call list item contact request, and then for this field I'll call it display name. Now, of course, our R class hasn't been imported, so let's go ahead and hit Alt-Enter, and we import our R class. Now, you notice that the ID is now red because it doesn't exist. That's okay. It'll exist here pretty soon. Next up, I'm going to say created at equals cast to blah, 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 find view by ID. I can just copy this whole thing and change the last part to created at. And then for our avatar, will cast to image view, find view by ID, r.id. Then I'll just paste that in there, and I'll change this to avatar. Okay, so like I said, sometimes I do this where I have my view holder constructor get the alias at all the things. Sometimes I don't. I don't know under what criteria I think which way is cleaner. It does kind of look a little cleaner this way because the code that has to do with establishing these views is closer to where these views are defined. So maybe I'll start doing this as my my default way of handling view holders. All right, so the only method that we're going to overload here in our from our array adapter superclass is going to be our getView method, and that's really easy to overload. We're going to hit Alt Insert, and I'm going to start typing override, and we'll hit Enter, and then I'm going to type in getView, and that'll select this getView, and then I'll hit Enter, and then I'll clear out all the code out of there. So a really quick way to get an override. Here, I've said it a million times, get used to using the keyboard shortcuts. That's why I point them out. They will save you time. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to, for the first step, I'm going to grab this particular item. Remember, the getView method for the adapter is responsible for returning an inflated layout that, or an instantiated view, whether it came from a layout or not is irrelevant, that will be used for each individual row in the list view. So the most important thing to do first is to get a reference to the object that this row represents. So to do that, I'm going to say contact request equals get item position. So get item is a method that comes from the array adapter class. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create my view holder, and I'm going to say view holder view, and then now let's go ahead and instantiate the convert view if it's not already. So what I'm going to say is I'm going to say if convert view equals null, which means that we're not recycling a new view, we have to instantiate or inflate a new layout. So to do that, I'm going to say convert view equals, and then for this, what I'm going to do is use a field that I totally forgot to create earlier of inflator. So I'm going to say inflator.inflate, passing in, first of all, my my layout resource that I want to inflate, in which case is r.layout.listItem contact request, passing in our view group parent and passing in false for the attached to root parameter. Now this code won't compile just yet because of two reasons. First of all, the inflator field doesn't exist yet. We'll be creating that here in a second. And second of all, our layout file doesn't exist either, but we'll be creating that as well. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say view equals new view holder, passing in the convert view. Then I'm saying convert view.setTag view. So for the else condition of this block, we're simply going to extract my view holder from the view. So I'm going to say view equals cast to view holder, convert view.getTag. All right, so now that we have all that set up, we can go ahead and start messing with our actual items on this particular row. So the first thing I'm going to do is the display name, because that's pretty easy. I'm going to say view.displayname.setText, passing in request.getUser.getDisplayName. Pretty straightforward. Next up, let's do our image. So I'm going to say Picasso. Picasso right there. I'm making sure to select Picasso out of the autocomplete window so that when I hit enter, the appropriate import tag will appear at the top of the file. So I'm going to say Picasso with getContext. Now, getContext is a method that comes from us from the array adapter. Dot load, and then I'm going to say request.getUser.getAvatarURL into view.avatar. So really, that's all you need to do. Now, the next thing is I want to go ahead and put together our created@at field, and this will change depending on if this request was from us or if this request was from someone else. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and grab a generalized date string called created@, and I'm going to set it to dateUtils. Oh, I did not mean to collapse that. dateUtils.formatDateTime, passing in our call to getContext, and then passing in our milliseconds, which is going to be our Unix timestamp basically, which is going to be request.getCreated@.getTime in milliseconds. I'm going to go ahead and break these parameters up into their own lines to clean up this code a bit. And then for the flags, I'm going to pass in dateUtils.formatShowDate and dateUtils.formatShowTime. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say if request is from us, then I'm going to say view.created@, oh, not even close, created@, setText, sent@, plus created@, which is our date. And then otherwise, created@, setText, and then this is going to be received at, or just received, I don't know, created@. And the final thing we do is we return convert view. So yeah, pretty straightforward. We just do some basic date formatting using dateUtils, and then depending on if this request was sent from us, we change the verbiage a little bit. So if it was sent from us, we say sent at blah blah blah, but if it was sent from another person, we say received blah 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 blah. Alright, so let's go ahead and before we make this layout, I want to go ahead and fix this inflator field. So to do that, up here at the top of the class, I'm going to create a new field. It's going to be a private, oh, didn't mean to do it there, private layout inflator. There you go. Then what I'm going to do is in the constructor, I'm going to say inflator equals activity.getLayoutInflator. So all we're doing here is we're just grabbing the layout inflator from the activity and just storing it into a local local field that we reuse in the getView method. All right, so before we jump into the fragment itself, let's go ahead and put together our layout. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to hit Alt-Enter and select Create Layout Resource File. And I'm going to make sure the root element is set to a relative layout instead of a linear layout, and then hit OK. And I'm going to fix that. Okay, so for this, what I'm going to do is for the height, I want wrap content because we don't want to fill the parent with the height because these are obviously list view items. And we want to give this a padding of 8 dp, I guess. Next up, I want to go ahead and create an image view. An image view will have a width of 64 dp and a height of 64 dp. Now, if you wanted to get fancy, you could put the 64 dps inside of a layout, a styles XML file, a values XML file, and you can change it on a per device basis if you want to. But in this case, we're just going to hard code that in. So next up, I'm going to create a linear, not a list view, linear layout with a width of match parent and a height of wrap content and an orientation of vertical. Come on. And then we want to go ahead and, well, before we move on, I do need to go ahead and give my image view a ID. I need to give my image view an ID so that I can reference it from my linear layout. So I'm going to say the ID is going to be a new ID, list item contact request _ avatar. Now for the linear layout, I'm going to say to end of request _ avatar. So notice that's all I had to type is request underscore AVA, and then hit enter. So that autocomplete a bunch of stuff. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say align top request avatar and align bottom request avatar. Then, for the orientation, yeah, let's keep that vertical. And then inside of here, we want to create two text views. They'll both have a width and height of wrap content. One will have an ID of list item contact request. The first one will have display name. I'm going to give him a text of display name. And just like I said before when we were talking about creating list views, I always like to give little placeholder values for my views when I'm working them out, even though I know that the text of this text view will be replaced at runtime. But that's okay that it is. Anyway, next up what I want to do is I'm going to give it a... let's give it a text size of 14 SP. And a text style of bold. And let's give it a slightly transparent color here. A slightly transparent black color. So I'm going to say text color equals hash DE000 or DE000000. So that gives it a slightly transparent black. And yeah, that should be that should be it for the display name. I might be able to also maybe add a margin bottom of 4dp. Next up, I want a text view, another text view, and this one will have a width and height of wrap content. Not surprisingly, his ID is going to be list item contact request underscore created at. And for him, let's see here. I'll give him a text of created at so I can see how he looks. I think that's fine. I don't really have a problem with that. You can play around with this more if you want. And then the next thing I'm going to do is... it looks like I am slightly missing some things on my linear layout. Now, the reason why I created my linear layout and I did the align top and align bottom is because what I want to do with the linear layout is actually give it a gravity of center. So I'm going to say gravity equals center. And you'll notice what that does, or whoops, center, let's do center vertical. You'll notice what that did is it aligned the inside elements to be perfectly centered against the image view. So that's a really cool little technique. So you see that the linear layout takes up all of the space above and below, or sorry, within the bounds of that image view, and then its child views are then centered horizontally or vertically inside. Then on my linear layout, I want to give it a margin start of 8dp just to push these little text items away from that avatar. Okay, I think that's really about it as far as our layout goes. So now the last thing we need to do is put together our actual fragment layout. So I'm going to start off with building the fragment layout for our pending contact request, and then we'll put together the code for it. So the layout is going to be under our resource folder layout, and it's going to be under fragment pending contact requests. And for this guy, I currently just have a list view. I could go ahead and make this a little bit more interesting than it is right now by going ahead. I'm going to take this list view. I'm going to take this XMLNS out of it, and I'm going to hit Control X to copy it. And then I'm going to go ahead and wrap this whole thing in a frame layout. And the frame layout will have I'll paste in the XMLNS, and we'll have a width of match parent and a height of match parent. What I want to do here is I want to use the simple frame layout to throw together a progress frame, a nice little frame that'll appear in the center that will appear with a little progress bar while our stuff is loading. So to do that, I'm going to create another frame layout inside of this frame layout with a match parent and a match parent. And for the inner frame layout, I'm going to go ahead and give him a color of, let's say, CFD8DC, which is a color I just grabbed from the material design guidelines. And then inside of this guy, we'll go ahead and set his clickable to true, so when he's visible, you won't be able to click through him. And yeah, and we'll also give him an ID. So we'll give him an ID of fragment pending contact requests underscore progress frame. Then finally, inside of the progress frame, I'm going to create a progress bar with a wrap content, width and height, indeterminate only set to true, and a layout underscore gravity of center. So now we'll have our nice little spinning guy in the center of this frame layout. Okay, so now that I have this together, I can now display a really cool little frame layout progress bar thingy when the data is loading. So now that we've done that, let's go ahead and actually load the data. Let's jump all the way up to our activities package our fragments package, and select our pending contact request fragment. And let's start off by, at the top of the file, creating a couple fields that we're going to need. First of all, I'm going to create a private view progress frame, and then I'm going to create a private contact requests adapter. Then on our onCreate view, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say progress frame equals view find view by ID r ID progress frame, and in this case I want the activity or fragment pending contact request progress frame. Then I'm going to instantiate my adapter, so I'm going to say adapter equals new contact request adapter. Then I'm going to go ahead and get my list view, so I'm going to say list view equals cast to list view view.findView by ID r.id pending list. Also, of course, we have to pass in get activity as the constructor parameter, or, well, get activity. Do I have a, no I don't. Cast to base activity. Oh, come on. What are you doing? Cast base activity, get activity. So we're passing in the activity that owns this fragment as the one constructor parameter for our adapter. All right, so now that we have our list view, I can simply say list view.setAdapter adapter. And now you could do all your other list viewy things. Like if you wanted something to happen when you clicked on one of these things, you would do that here. So the next thing I gotta do is send out my request. And before I send out my request, I'm gonna say progress frame. No, actually I don't need to do that either. Because the progress frame is already visible. I'm really used to the progress frames being hidden by default, and then you make them visible when you do a request. In this particular case, it's the other way around. When we enter this fragment, we want the progress frame visible, but then when we get a result, we want to make it disappear. So I guess really all that's left here is to send our request. So I'm going to say bus.post new contacts dot, and then get contacts. For this, we want get contacts request, and we want from us to be set to true. So we want to get our friend request that we've sent. Then I'm going to create a subscribe method down here, subscribe. And it's going to be a public void on get contacts requests. And the parameter will be contacts.get contacts request response. Get contacts request response. Now for this, what I'm going to do is, if you recall, our service response has this show error toast if there was an error, and otherwise it doesn't. So I'm going to invoke that first. I'm going to say response.show error toast, passing in get activity as the context. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and set up our progress frame, or make our progress frame disappear, but I'm going to do it with animations. So I'm going to say progress frame dot animate alpha to 0 dot set duration, and we can do 250 here, and then I'm going to say dot with end action new runnable, which will say progress frame dot set visibility, oh, not even close, set visibility view dot gone, and then dot start. So what's going on here? Well, we're simply starting an animation where we fade it out to 0 alpha, and then when the animation completes, we have a little bit of code that makes it go away for good. All right, so after we set up our progress frame, let's go ahead and populate our adapter. For our adapter, I'm going to say adapter.clear and then adapter.addAll response.requests. And that's it. So I hope you guys are starting to see the power of this the service layer that we put together, in that we can write so little code and almost every case is handled for us automatically. Like what happens if the user rotates the device? What happens if another activity pops up above this activity or of this fragment? So all those cases are now handled for us, which is really cool. Anyway, let's go ahead and run this and test this and see what happens. So I'll just hit run, bring my little virtual machine down here. And I'll wait, and wait. And, oh, I gotta go ahead and tell it which device to use. And coming down here, we get our little spinning guy, and we have our contacts. So as you see, we have our images, we have our nice little padding, we have our display names, and we have our created at field. And you'll of course notice that it all says sent at because we're looking at friend requests that we have sent, not friend requests or contact requests that we've sent, not contact requests that we've received. Anyway, yeah, I think that pretty much wraps up all I want to do in this video. In the next one, we're going to do something pretty similar with putting together our contacts list. So yeah, we'll see you guys then.